Hey y'all, let me just offer up this idea um because I want I feel compelled to add a little bit of an addendum to my original video about war breaking out between Israel and Hamas, and now we've got bombing of the Gaza Strip, and blockades of food and water, and it just seems like a really, really bad situation. Um, and you know, I'm not I'm not taking either side per se here. I think a war crime is a war crime, whoever does it, and I'm totally against it. Whoever it is committed against, and whoever is the committer of it. Um, it seems like with this conflict, there's plenty to go around on both sides, which I know will automatically make some people mad at me. Like I'm saying it's moral, like I'm talking about moral equivalence or something. But I'm just not going to go into that. I'm not going to, you know, I won't. I do have my thoughts about those kinds of things, but I don't want to go any deeper into it than that, because I just think it would be. I just think, for me anyway, it's not where the meat of the story is. I understand why it would be important for others um, to come down hard for one side or the other side, but I'm just not going to do that here. So what I am going to do is I want to make y'all remember something, and maybe hopefully this will give some of y'all food for thought, with regard to the JQ, because you know you can't really avoid the JQ with this issue. It's all over the place, and it's stand with Israel or the opposite of stand with Israel. Um, so I want y'all to remember, though, that just a couple of years ago, not long ago at all, when certain countries uh, around the world, mostly in the Western world, were were taking very draconian measures against their populations, compelling them by mandate to get injected with something that might or might not be good for them. Okay, and something that people should at least have some say in, whether they want to get it or not, and that their continued ability to go places, or have jobs, and do other necessary things that should not be infringed. I'm talking about the mandates, of course. And there were places that were more, like I said, more draconian than other places. I feel very lucky, very blessed to live in a part of the world, in a country, and specifically in a region, a state where things were less draconian probably than anywhere else. Which isn't to say there wasn't pressure to get it done, but nobody was prevented from working a job, that I'm aware of. I don't know if private companies might. I don't know if any of them pushed mandates in the state of Georgia or not. But I know that it wasn't. It was something that was not pushed on like public school teachers and other public workers ever, as the same way that it was in the Northeast. But in Israel at this time, it was truly, to be an Israeli citizen was to be under the most draconian law imaginable when it comes to these mandated injections. Like, it was bad in a lot of places. It was bad in Australia. I'm still mad as hell at Australia for caving in the way they did and for letting their. I mean, I'm still kind of pissed off at Australia. Um, uh, Bad. It was bad in Australia and New Zealand. Like the Anglo South was particularly putrid on the score. It got really bad in places like Austria for a time, where they were pushing it harder and harder and making it so that you couldn't do anything, you couldn't work, you couldn't like it was hard to go anywhere or have a job um, without getting those injections, with that substance that might or might not be good for you, as we've seen. Um, but where it was at the absolute worst was Israel. Okay. Now I mentioned this just to like with regard to the JQ. I mentioned this just to raise the possibility that um, there might be more commonalities between the, let's say, the ordinary citizens just scraping and struggling to get by in the Zionist entity or Israel, depending on your perspective. Whatever you want to call it, let's not quibble about names, but I know some people don't even want to call it Israel. But in any case, in that country, you know, if you were just an ordinary citizen, if you were like a fry cook or a cab driver, or I don't know, a school teacher, or whatever, what have you, and there are ordinary citizens who have mundane jobs who are still of that bloodline. They're not all dominating, the networks and both political parties and so forth. They are disproportionately found in lots of powerful places, no doubt. But that's a different issue. So I'm trying to frame this in a way that I wonder if it will. I wonder if it might, open some hearts in some way. And I don't mean to sound like I sound preachy or anything, but I just want to suggest this possibility. Okay, and the possibility that I'm suggesting is that during this time, it was, if being in the J Club is a privilege that gives you special things, well, being a citizen of that particular country was landed you in this horrific circumstance where, again, they pushed worse mandates there, more draconian, more totalitarian, more infringing mandates there than it seemed like anywhere else. Like, they weren't. You couldn't go into grocery stores. You couldn't. You couldn't have a job. You couldn't go anywhere. They were really pushing it hard, and they kept pushing it. Like, it wasn't like beyond just the first. Like, for a lot of places, it was like, get the first shot, and then we'll back off a little bit. And if you want to get boosted, then that's good. But we won't push as hard for the the booster shots. But in Israel, the powers that be pushed hard for the main shot, and then they pushed really hard for the booster shots on their own citizens. Okay. Now, some people hear this information, and they say, "Oh well, it was probably a placebo." It was probably a placebo anyway. They probably, because the Jays don't ever want to intend harm to other Jays. So they'll do anything to anybody else who's outside of their in group, but people within their group, they'll let them slide. So I actually had people tell me that, like, well, I bet they're just giving them placebos there, whereas in other Western nations they're giving people the real thing, and all the effects that result from the real thing. But in Israel, they insisted that a couple people that I discussed this with just said, well, they strongly suspected that it was just, probably all just a farce in Israel. I suspect otherwise. Okay, there's no way to know for sure if I'm right, or if the people who are theorizing what they're theorizing are right. But I don't see the point in them pushing this so severely on their own people, unless perhaps what the rulers of that nation have in common with the rulers of other nations is that they don't really care about their own people. They care about building up their power base. They care about, in other words, they're just as psychopathic, just as reptilian, if you will, and just as absent of empathy as as people in big time politics, people who are big players in the system, whether it be that they were elected or not. In many cases, unelected, of course. The unelected oligarchs are the ones who seem to be calling this the most shots in supposed democratic countries. But just think about that. Like, they pushed this poison on their own people. Do they really care about their own people? So, in other words, if one proposes what I was proposing the other day, my suspicion, which is just that I found it strange. I didn't find it believable that the most sophisticated, intelligence service in the world, with all of this high tech, gadgetry at their disposal, and and a long history of of fiercely protecting their border, that all of a sudden it all breaks down. So, to such a degree that, what they say, 700, 800, 900 Israeli citizens ended up killed because they just couldn't see their ass from a hole in the ground. These extremely sophisticated, hyper competent people, suddenly it was like, well, what's going on here? Hey, it's Hamas parachuting in, and so I find that really, really hard to believe, just like, the metaphor I used the other day with the Pentagon. I won't repeat that here. I don't need to. But for those of you who are, you know, I don't know, who have this thing about conspiracy theories or whatever, or just thinking that conspiracy theories are gay, or I don't know, if you just think whatever you might think about this current conflict and how it started. Um, isn't it strange? Can you at least say that it's strange that a hyper sophisticated um, uh, you know intelligence service allowed this to happen? Just allowed allowed these Islamic militants to come in and wreak major havoc, take people hostage, rape women in plain sight, and do all the other things that they're reported to have done. And I know some people are going to doubt whether those things actually happened. Again, I don't until I see compelling evidence that it was that it was fake. Then I'm gonna believe the reports. But if but just positing that the reports are true, what does that tell you about this same ruling class? It tells you that they, I don't know, I'm not going to say it was a false flag. I'm not going to say it was something where they just said let's just let this happen so that we can have an excuse to go hog wild against Hamas and to just bomb the hell out of our enemies. If we have to sacrifice a few hundred of our own people, that's worthwhile. We'll do that. It's worth what it's worth the benefit. It's worth what we can get out of it. You know, would it really be so difficult to think that this was their mindset? And if so, if you can, um, uh, if you like me tend to see it as suspicious that things fell out the way that they did, um, then can you make a connection between that and the same ruling class? I mean, in this case, the ruling class supposedly just dropping the ball, or just the ones who are supposed to keep the citizenry safe. They just like, oops, they fell asleep uh, and so and suddenly stopped watching the monitors and stopped. I don't know, stopped doing all the things that they do. The with all the technology that they have, the incredibly sophisticated technology and that they have. They just I don't know. Um, uh, for some reason, it was just like they just stopped. They just had this spasm of incompetence that lasted a few hours and allowed this to happen um, in plain sight, in broad daylight. Uh, not that if it happened at night, it would still be very suspicious. Just like letting the plane hit the Pentagon is suspicious. Again, like I said in my previous video. So, what am I saying? I'm saying perhaps your understanding of the JQ should be, dare I say, though I hate this word, I've grown to hate this word, nuanced. I hate the kind of people who use that word. But can you, I will just say, I think it's entirely appropriate to make a distinction between the rulers of a country uh, who, uh, in one case, force this perhaps not so wonderful medical treatment on their own citizenry, with extreme, again, extreme prejudice, with extreme levels of draconian uh, um, mentality, or a severely draconian mentality. That those same, isn't it like that those same people would be the ones who are really the ones to hold responsible here? That they would let innocent people die, innocent people be victimized and terrorized because it suited their agenda to let it happen. And so again, should we perhaps draw a distinction between the ruling class of this this country, which happens to be of this particular ethnicity, and the regular citizens of that country, who also happen to be of that same ethnicity, but who are, like a lot of us, don't have a lot of power, just are trying to get by, just doing the best they can, working their crappy jobs, or maybe their jobs aren't so crappy, but they're just not really powerful people. They're just ordinary citizens. They're ordinary Schlomos. Just like we have ordinary Joes here. These are ordinary Schlomos. Isn't that a possibility? Like, I don't know. I hope y'all have followed me, and if you have, watched this video to its conclusion, then bless you. And let me know your thoughts below.